Raise your hand if you do not think children with cancer who are American citizens should be deported.
You do not think.
Looks like it's all the Democrats and none of the Republicans.
We even said, you know what, many of us will not offer any more amendments tonight. We won't vote for the overall bill. But if you agree to this, we'll drop any other amendments. We'll take the win that this would be in the bill, that you would agree U.S. citizens can't be deported. They voted to allow Donald Trump to deport U.S. citizens.
That's pretty stunning. House Democrats reacting there after Judiciary Committee Republicans rejected an amendment to block ICE from deporting U.S. citizens. Hours later, a Texas judge ruled the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act for deportations illegal. Joining me now, Barrett Berger, former federal prosecutor. Barrett, good to have you back. So the message from the Judiciary Committee Republicans is pretty clear. But how do you interpret the equally strong message from that Trump-appointed federal judge in Texas?
This was a very important decision by this judge in Texas. Essentially, this was the first decision that we've had by a judge saying that this Alien Enemies Act is unconstitutional as it's currently being used by the administration. Now, we've had other judges rule on the procedure, saying issuing like temporary restraining orders, saying it needed to be brought in a certain jurisdiction or by certain plaintiffs. This was the first time that we've had a judge rule on the merits and say all of the precursors that have to be there in order for this act to be used haven't been met. Now, remember, this act dates back to 1798. It's been used in wartime situations, was last used in World War II. And it really is meant for a situation where there's a hostile government that's either at war with us or there's been some sort of an invasion. The administration has tried to say that there is this invasion by these Venezuelan gangs and have tried to sort of fit the facts of these gang members into this statute to allow it to deport these people much more quickly. Now we have a judge shutting this down, saying it's unconstitutional. There is no invasion. Simply calling it invasion doesn't make it so.
Let me just ask you something, because relative to this specific question, you used the word unconstitutional. As I was posing the question, I used the word illegal. Are they one and the same relative to this issue?
They are. If you are deporting somebody that shouldn't be deported, or you're deporting them under a law that shouldn't be used, it is both unconstitutional and illegal.
Okay.
And I think what made the first clip that you played so startling for many reasons is because it should be so uncontroversial to say that U.S. citizens can't be deported. I mean, it is one of our central tenets of citizenship, really, that if you are a citizen, you get to stay in the country. It doesn't matter if you commit a crime. It doesn't matter what you do. If you are a citizen, you get to stay here. So to me, the idea that you would have, a bill that says exactly this, that people oppose that is shocking, because it is something that should be completely uncontroversial.
And look, if you're a U.S. citizen and you commit a crime in this country and you are found guilty of doing so, you will be incarcerated in this country. But let's listen to part of what the president said this week about not returning Kilmer Abrego Garcia from El Salvador.
He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS, as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there.
So Trump's admission that his administration is targeting people based on tattoos, is this legally problematic for the government?
No, and let me just say that with an asterisk. The government regularly uses certain markers to have to determine whether somebody has gang affiliations, terrorist affiliations, organized crime affiliations, right? One thing that can be used in connection with other evidence might be tattoos. If every member of a gang has a certain tattoo, you have somebody else that has that too. If there is other evidence also tying them to this gang, that could be something that the government would rely on here. What's interesting, though, there is no one that's saying that this person couldn't necessarily be deported if they had committed a crime, if other factors were there, according to the law, according to due process, not necessarily to El Salvador, if there's a court order saying he can't be deported to El Salvador. But of course, people who are here without legal status, who commit crimes, should be deported. Absolutely. However, as the Supreme Court has said, they deserve due process to make sure, number one, they have committed the crime, and number two, they are being deported to an appropriate place. That's why the due process is so important, and that's what's been missing in this case.
Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson this week addressed what she called the elephant in the room, referring to Trump and his allies' attacks on judges who rule against his policies. She said, quote, "The attacks are not random. They seem designed to intimidate those of us who serve in this critical capacity. The threats and harassment are attacks on our democracy, on our system of government, and they ultimately risk undermining our Constitution and the rule of law." And she also urged her colleagues to show raw courage to dispense justice without fear of the results. How unusual are statements like this?
Unusual. Supreme Court justices don't like speaking outside of court. They prefer to speak through their writing or from the bench during oral argument. They don't usually like having to give any sort of political speech and shy away from that. We've seen in a few instances recently, justices sort of breaking that barrier. We saw Justice Roberts speaking out on this same issue. What that tells me is that they feel intimidated. They feel scared on these attacks on the judiciary. And it's not just, one or two. This has been a pattern of intimidation, not just to judges, but to lawyers. We see this through the executive orders targeting law firms, targeting universities. And what the problem is not only, the huge risk to the physical safety of these judges, which is a real issue and something that I know both the Supreme Court and judges all the way down to the district level are concerned about these days, but really to the independence of the judiciary and to the lawyers. And as we've seen, the courts are really one of the last guardrails that we have to essentially determine what's constitutional or not, to say we need due process, all of these steps and processes that are so important to our Constitution. And if they feel like they can't do their job without fear or favor, if they feel like there is a threat to their physical safety, then really the independence of our entire justice system has really broken down.
Yeah, sobering prospect. Berit Berger, thank you so much.